Live from Chicago, it's Chris Sells His Soul. I'm your host, Chris Bogue, and this is my show on LinkedIn Live, where I have conversations with cool people who will help you work more creatively. Today my guest is Cam Beaudoin. Cam, please introduce yourself and tell my audience where they can find you.
Hey, Chris. So great to be on the show today. My name is Cam Beaudoin. I am a accessibility champion, accessibility speaker, and you can find me on LinkedIn, where I host a weekly LinkedIn live show talking about the business of digital accessibility and disability inclusion.
Exactly. Yes. This is today's episode is called That's Not Funny. We're going to be talking about accessibility. We're going to be talking about finding joy and fun in places that are typically thought of as boring or not very fun. And definitely go check out Cam, follow him on LinkedIn. And if you are not familiar with me, I'm your host, Chris Bogue. So this is my show. I'm a writer and comedian and coach, and I coach people to make mercifully short video content that drives revenue. So find Cam, find me on LinkedIn. Best way to follow us is to ring our bell. Click follow, ring the bell. You'll get lots of great content every day about accessibility, comedy, sales, video content. You name it. So I've got some questions here for Cam. We've got two great topics today. But before I ask him anything, I'm going to throw it to the audience. So hello, everybody who is watching this in real time. Hello, Sri and Lynn and Jamie and Claire. And if you are watching today and you want to get into the conversation, make sure you leave a comment.
I see Diana there as well.
Yeah, Diana. Hey, Diana, how's it going? We don't know if you're here unless you leave a content. So hey, say hi, tell us where you're listening to the show tonight. And if you have a question about comedy or accessibility, feel free to drop it in the comments, and Cam and I might answer it during the course of the show. So yeah, the sax, we might get saxier tonight. Who knows? But yeah, so Cam, I've been waiting for this episode for a long time. I'm very happy to have you on the show. So let's just take a step back, just for anybody who's unfamiliar with the term. Could you just quickly define what accessibility is?
Absolutely. Yeah. Accessibility really refers to access to technology, locations, places, buildings, services for people with disabilities. And I know you've seen accessibility features before. For example, have you ever maybe held two bags or held a cup of coffee and maybe a pizza, a nice Chicago pizza, and tried to open a door and you had to press a button instead and that opened the door automatically for you? That's an accessibility feature. Have you ever had to use a ramp to enter a building or on a curb, like to go onto the street? Maybe you had a cart or you were shopping at Costco, something like that. That curb cut is an accessibility feature. The text to speech on your phone is also an accessibility feature. So that, in short, is what accessibility is.
Right, yes. It's making it so whatever it is, be it a public space, be it a piece of video content, accessibility means everybody can enjoy it, not just people who, have full hearing or full mobility or something like that. So, Cam, you're an accessibility speaker. You've been working in this field for a long time. I'm going to start by asking you, what's funny about accessibility?
Nothing's funny about accessibility, right? We should never laugh at other people. But is there humor in accessibility? Absolutely. And I think that's the real fun part about what I try to do. Disabilities, right? We aren't normally taught on how to talk about disability as we're growing up. I don't know about you, but my parents never talked about disabilities growing up, what they are, how to speak about them. Neither did the elementary school teachers or the high school teachers or university teachers or HR departments and companies I've worked for as well. Nobody knows how to talk about disabilities. And so it's not funny. We shouldn't be making fun of. But can we find humor in that? Absolutely. And I can't wait to get into some stories a little bit later in the show.
Yeah, well, let me ask that opposite question then. What's not funny about accessibility? Why is this a topic that people think is serious?
Well, I think a lot of it comes from the fact that in society, we tend to pity people with disabilities. Oh, poor person, they are at a disadvantage in their life. I have met more people with disabilities who own their disability as part of themselves. And that's really the amazing thing. They say, this is me. I cannot be anybody else. So therefore, accept me as I am, as part of society and as part of this culture. So therefore, like, I am here, accept me as who I am. So I would say like that.
Yeah. I have kind of an unusual journey because unlike you, I am not an accessibility expert. I'm not doing consulting work necessarily for like how to make a website more accessible because that's not what I specialize in. But I do make my own content, and I consciously decided when I started on this journey that I was going to make my videos captioned. That was my starting point. I looked around. I said, I want to start making LinkedIn content. I noticed a lot of people whose names were like head of content, head of strategic content, video coach, video producer, video trainer, posting videos that did not have captions. And I was fortunate enough in my last sales role, I was selling education technology. And our head of accessibility was a man named Victor Coves. And he is, Covis, I always mispronounce his name because I'm a jerk. But he was very passionate about accessibility, and the things he said really left an impression on me, and he had this very human way of speaking about it. He would get very excited about it, and I'm a comedian, and a lot of my comedy is about being dejected, is about being overlooked, about being talked down to, about being disrespected. And the more I started making accessible content, the more I started realizing, oh, these are themes that this group of people can really identify with, because I hate to say it, I'm not trying to put anyone on blast out there on LinkedIn, but most of the content I see is not created for deaf people. They just decided, you know what, that's too much work. I'm not going to bother. How many deaf people could there really be trying to watch this video?
Right.
And yeah, the more I talk to deaf people, the more that's all they face. And the irony is, I'm like, they want to watch your video.
Right.
You content creators whining about your low engagement. There are millions of people in this country that are just not going to get your message because you're not including them. So I want you to talk a little bit about, like, you found this tract. Cam is a speaker. He does a lot of like speaking engagements, and you have kind of come at this from a different angle than a lot of other professionals in the accessibility space. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about like the direction you're trying to go with your brand and your company and your content, and how that maybe differs from what we're used to seeing in content about accessibility.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to just go back to your point on captions just for one second, because this is really interesting. Have you or anyone in the audience ever, maybe watch TikTok while in bed late at night? Have you ever done that?
Oh, heavens, no. Why would I spend hours doing that constantly?
Right. And if anyone like does that, you're probably, if you have a partner, you're sleeping next to your partner, they're half asleep, half awake, something like that. And they're, you don't want to disturb them, right? So what do? You turn off the sound on your phone, right? That's normally something you do. 80% of people are looking at content on the feeds with no sound on. If you're not captioning your content by now, you are leaving 80% of your viewers just off the side. And I'm not talking about those fancy fonts. Like, that's the crazy thing. The ones that have like the big bubbly fonts and stuff like that are still exclusionary, because sometimes you end up watching the text instead of listening to the actual content. Make it that really nice white on black, just really, really simple. And you will see your engagement climb. And you will have created content that's usable by people who are hard of hearing and deaf. Isn't that just that stat alone should convince people to start putting captions on their videos?
Yeah, this is the other thing you learn about diversity is, when you first talk to people about accessibility, their response is, well, I don't know if I have any deaf clients, or I don't know if I have any deaf prospects or whatever. And then once you start asking people for advice, once you start talking to people, once you start captioning all your stuff, you start to realize that definition is bigger than you realized. And I talk to people all the time who I would have no idea unless they told me. But they're like, I have hearing loss. Right. I watch everything with captions. And then I realize, I'm like, oh, my dad wears a hearing aid. Right. If he wants to watch something, he has to go get it. If he has it out, he has to get it and put it in. And even if you think about, you're sending business emails, right? Maybe you're sending someone in a crowded office.
Right.
It's like they can either take out their headphones and plug them in, or they could do something else, Yep. And it's like, you want to make it as easy as possible for anyone to consume your message. And yeah, this is the irony. People say, oh, I don't want to, go out of my way because how many deaf people do I have? Well, they're also missing all the non-deaf people too, because everybody likes captions. And if you make content that everybody can enjoy, you don't have to worry about that.
Exactly. And it boggles my mind why we haven't realized that. And it's so easy nowadays, Chris. It's so easy now. There are so many apps out there that even if you don't want to have Adobe Premiere or any of the more advanced video software, there's stuff that does it for free. CapCut, we've talked about that before.
Tell the audience, yeah, it's free. It's a free program. CapCut is a free program you can use to caption videos and edit videos right on your phone.
Free speech to text right there on your phone, syncs it up as well. You just got to correct it if, I always get Baldwin or something like that whenever. Cameron Baldwin is who I get whenever it's, I just fix that on the captions. That's it.
Always,
and then I'm
always
done.
Always proofread.
Always proofread your stuff.
Yeah, because it's just like the auto captions will get you 90% of the way there. You fix a couple typos, a couple spelling errors, a couple proper names. All of a sudden, you have a professional, well-timed caption track.
Exactly.
And guess what? Your competitors don't.
Exactly. Yeah. And one thing, going back to your example of your dad, he wears a hearing aid. And I'll bet you if you ask your dad, you say, hey, are you disabled? He's going to say, I'm not disabled. Right? He's going to say that because the identity of somebody with a disability, that is in flux. That is very personal choice. Thinking of some comments, if you want some stats, 1 in 7 people in the world have some form of disability. Now, do they identify as having a disability? That's a bit of up to debate. I'm colorblind, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. I got some funny stories about that. Do I identify as having a disability? Well, no, I don't. But man, when people put red on green, hello Christmas time right now, that's hard for me to read. It's just hard. And I will choose to read blogs or go to websites that don't have that color scheme on them. By the way, if you're creating a website and you've got red font as your links, that's bad for me. That's really bad. I don't even know the links are there. That's unless there's an underline, and that's a whole other technique as well.
Yeah, and we'll get into this into the second half of here too.
Yeah.
Because I'm a satirist, and I really do believe that comedy has a role in speaking truth to power, but it also has a role in kind of like taking some of the shine out of myths in culture and stuff. And like I feel like companies want to do this thing where like they put disabled people on a pedestal, or they put DEI initiatives on a pedestal rhetorically while not doing anything to solve the actual problems. And what I like to do is flip that around and say, okay, let's put you in the shoes of someone who's in this very frustrating circumstance, and let's see how that feels. Also, Cam, I'm getting a little bit of volume on your end through your speakers. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. Now, you asked me a question before about what's my approach, right?
It's back. There's music playing in your.
Oh, yeah. Give me a second. Let's turn this on.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to pull up a question here. I'm going to answer a question they asked in the audience while you're getting that. So somebody asked here, is LinkedIn doing the closed captioning for this program? They are not. Those are real-time closed captions provided by StreamYard. So StreamYard is a service. They have auto captions for live events. Not everyone does. But yeah, you could check out StreamYard. And it's actually a thing that I am, there's a lot of talk about AI and all the risks that has to, creators. I'm actually very excited about how AI is quickly improving the quality of auto captions and empowering people to be able to caption their stuff on their own. So you got a tab open there still, or?
All right. How's that working? Is that a bit better?
I don't know. What do you think, audience? I think it's gone. Okay.
I think it's gone.
Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna get into this in just a moment. Actually, this is. Wait, did you have a thought you wanted to complete there before I answered this question?
No, but you were just going to ask me something about my approach. So if you want to ask this question first, let's do that, and then let's.
Oh yeah, I just answered Dean's question. So yeah, your approach. Where is it different?
So my whole thing is that if we don't start to make accessibility and disability easy to talk about, well then people are always going to treat it like at arm's length, right? It's still too weird. I don't get it. I don't know why this is important. But when I start, my whole idea is if we can make the business think of accessibility as important, if we can make the business see the return on investment for investing in technology that applies to people with disabilities, then they're going to see a whole new market come to them. And to me, that's again, why would I exclude 1 out of every 7 people on the planet to anything that I'm doing, right? That doesn't make any business sense. And when you start to think of the statistics of people with disabilities out there, it just makes business sense to start making your services usable by people with disabilities. We talked very briefly about captions, but maybe if someone owns a physical location, like a physical store, let's use a coffee shop, for example, having tables. And by the way, there's lots of laws around this as well. You must have services and available to persons with disabilities. But having a table that's a reduced height, that's also an accessibility feature too. What would that cost you? Like, what do you think that costs a business to have a table that's lower? Do you think it costs any more than any other table in the coffee shop? Probably not, right?
No.
Yeah, and thinking of maybe someone who works in more of an office setting, right? A desk that can go higher or lower, one of the standing desks. Most accessibility accommodations cost less than $200 for organizations as well. So for their employees, there's a lot of actual things to think about here. And sometimes it can get quite intimidating. But just so you know, there are laws around this as well for employers who want to bring on persons with disabilities. There's laws out there for your mobile apps or your software, your SaaS technology to be usable by people of any ability as well. And if you just build things in a way that's according to technology as it should be built, like the HTML code, you're going to be fine. You're actually going to make something very usable by people of any ability.
Yeah, so this is good. And this is actually a great segue into our next segment, Gimme Gimme. Cam, are you ready for Gimme Gimme?
I'm ready for Gimme Gimme.
Okay, so for the audience, in case you don't know, LinkedIn was invented for self-promotion. That's right. The whole purpose of LinkedIn was to help people get hired and to help run successful businesses. So every once in a while, we like to take a break on this show where we can get into character, and my guest and I can ask the audience for exactly what we want. So without further ado, Cam, are you ready for Gimme Gimme?
I'm ready for Gimme Gimme.
Hello! Welcome to Gimme Gimme. This is part of the show where I ask you for money. I'm Boss Bogue here telling you to buy my stuff, and today's sponsor is me. I pay for all of this with all of my services, all of my coaching, all of my digital products, of which I will now talk to you about at length. But first, if you would like to sponsor this show, we have sponsorships available for our final show of the year. The last Thursday of the year at 6 p.m. Central, we will be doing LinkedIn After Dark, the show for grown-ups where grown-ups talk about grown-ups things. And you actually have the opportunity in the audience today to get in on the fun. Right? So I'm going to be putting a link in here in just a moment. But if you want to have your business sponsored in me and Eddie Bannum and Jesse Lizak's comedy sketch, you can get in there for just $100. This sketch is going to blow up. We are having a sponsorship bit. You are going to be the center of a hilarious joke that gets tens of thousands of engagements on LinkedIn. And then we're going to pump you in the live show too. So noodle on that for a minute. Cam, what do you got?
I want you to hire me to come speak at your company to tell them about how to bring disability inclusion into your organization. I want you to come follow me on LinkedIn, and I want you to watch my show every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time, where I talk about the business of disability inclusion and accessibility. Chris, what you got?
Yeah, go watch Cam's show. This guy is my golden boy, okay? You want to see somebody out there who's doing it as a professional speaker? You want to get professional speaking gigs? You want to talk about important topics that actually mean something to people with fun and joy and in a way that builds a following? Go check out Cam. Not only is his business amazing, not only are his speeches inspiring, but he learned from me.
I learned from you.
Yeah, that's right. Cam ponied up for a 3-month individual coaching session. And guess what? He's better than me now. He's getting bigger guests. He's getting bigger shows. He asks for bigger paychecks. And I guarantee you, he's better at video prospecting than any SDRs in the audience here. This man gets a 60% response rate at least. And why? Because he learned how to do it right before he started experimenting with it. He got his message down, got it direct, learned to make some fantastic content, and now he's out there putting us all to shame. Cam, what was it like working with me as a coach?
It was amazing. And you know what? It freaking works. That was the amazing thing. I could call you up and just say, Chris, I got to win. Or I could say, Chris, I need some help. And I got you.
And then we won. And then we figured out how to win.
Figured it out.
And that's what's happening out here, folks. It is not easy to figure out marketing and sales in this world where nobody picks up the phone and nobody answers emails. You need great video content. You need to be comfortable on video. And right now, you're in luck because I just announced yesterday for the first time ever, I am launching my first ever cohort coaching program. It is a group of 10 people. 4 slots have already been called. It is $300 to participate in this group for 6 weeks. We're going to be making insanely intelligent and entertaining personal content that's going to grow our brands on LinkedIn. We're having video challenges every week. We're having feedback and supporting each other and helping each other grow. You know it's going to be amazing, and you're going to be so angry when I jack up the price for cohort number 2. So get on over to chrisbogue.io right now and get in on the cohort. Cam, what else you got?
I can't beat that. That sounds like a great deal.
Well, you're going to have to beat that because now I'm going to plug my course, which is the complete guide to selling on video, which for any of you salespeople out there who are falling short of your quota right now, it might be exactly what you need. Cam here, like I said, my former student here gets at least 60% response rates on his videos. Want to know how much your response rates get? Person out there doing sales at home? 0, because you don't make any videos, because you don't know how. So we're going to watch an infomercial for that right now, and then Cam and I are going to resume for the rest of the episode. But this has been Gimme Gimme. Iggy, roll the tape. We're going to get started here filming our prospecting videos in just one moment. I'm a little bit peckish, so I'm just going to help myself to a little bit of lunch. Oh, why?
The goal is very simple. It's to get your first batch of 25 sales videos written, edited, captioned, and sent out to your prospects via Gmail and LinkedIn.
We're going to start by teaching you some of the basics on camera. Then we're going to go through script writing and develop a list for you. We're going to go through some sales strategy. And then we're actually going to batch the footage and upload it and caption it and send it out.
It's 2.5 hours total, so it's about the length of a Marvel movie. If you hate cold calling and cold emailing and you're a person who does much better in front of an audience, then this style of selling is probably for you. Don't worry if you buy the class and never finish it.
You're fired.
Radical. See you next module.
And we're back. Thanks, Cam. That was fun.
That was fun. I'm still in my jacket. Hold on.
You could be in whatever you want to be in. Oh, God. Mark, yeah, Mark's joining the cohort. Oh, Mark's going to be insanely funny in the cohort. That dude knows how to cold call. Get that guy on video. He's going to be a beast. But yeah, you know, this is actually the second part of the comedy here. So I noticed, or the show here, I noticed, where is Margot? Margot said something that I want to throw up here on the screen. Let me just find it. Yeah, okay, nothing is off limits in comedy. So I want to start with one of my favorite stories from Second City, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how we have fun, some of the fun stuff that we've done. So there's a story, it's legendary at Second City. So Key and Peele, everybody in the audience knows them. Key and Peele studied at the Second City. They did shows there. They had a sketch when they were at Second City about offensiveness and about stereotypes. And they did a joke where they made fun of every single ethnicity in the room. They made fun of black people and white people and Jews and Mexican people and Asian people. And they ran the gamut. They're like, let's just make fun of everybody. And they were leaving the theater one night, and someone rolled up to them in a wheelchair and said, "Hey, you guys forgot to make fun of wheelchairs. What gives?" And they got real awkward. And the guy in the wheelchair goes, "You know what I think? I think you were afraid of offending us. I think you pulled your punches on the wheelchair people because you didn't think we could handle it. And that offends me. If you had offended me, I wouldn't be offended. The fact that you didn't think I could take a joke, that offends me." And that stuck with them because they're like, you know what? We did pull our punches. And yeah, I've got my theories on this, but I want to hear from you, Cam. Why are people so afraid to be real about this topic, to talk about this topic in the human terms that we use? Why is it always behind this layer of DEI? And, you know, I feel like there's a lot of proper, correct ways to talk about this, and there's a million lived experiences that still need to be incorporated. And yeah, why do you think it is that you and I are two of the only people out there trying to have fun with this topic?
See, you know what? I think people are afraid that disability is a bad word. All right? Disability is not a bad word, right? We approach the conversation and you're going to say like that person who's differently able, maybe they don't, and then we get stuck, and then it just like turns into this cycle in our minds, and we don't want to say it. You can say someone's disabled, and that's just a fact, and that's a totally acceptable way to talk about it. Your story with Key and Peele, I've got stories. I've got some great stories. When I was at an accessibility conference, and I had my friend who's blind come up to me and say, "Cam, this is a really dangerous conference to me to be at because I keep bumping into people." And it was hilarious. It was hilarious for him
because it's real.
That.
It's
Isn't
real.
That real? Isn't that real? Like, where else would a concentration of people with vision impairment be than at a conference for accessibility? And it was the most real conversation ever. I have a friend with cerebral palsy.
Real quick, I'm still getting like beeps.
I'm getting a beep. I don't know what that is. I thought it was on your side. Is it?
No.
Oh, it wasn't my side. It was my drone. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right. That
the drone that we broke in the beginning of the show.
The drone that we broke.
Not to interrupt. Please continue.
But and then I've got a friend with cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is someone who can't control his muscles fully, right? He was at a conference and the speaker asked everyone, "Okay, everyone stand up now." And he turned to me and said, "Oh, finally." And it was, he can't stand. He's in a wheelchair, and it's being real. It's being approachable. It's being human. And I went out to go have beers with these guys afterwards, and it was just a normal experience. It's not to say, now I can't go and joke around them. I can't go and tell someone has cerebral palsy, "Why don't you stand up and give me a high five?" Like, that's not appropriate. But I'm colorblind, and I sure can joke with my friends about the fact that I can't see poker chips. I can't go play poker, not because I don't want to. Well, I lose a lot of money when I do. And it's because I can't tell the chips apart. So there's a brown chip and a green chip and a red chip, and I can't tell the difference between them. And I get ragged on by my friends too. And I mean, that's a fun experience because it's real and it is funny. That is a funny experience to not be able to tell.
It's like,
Cam, did you want to really raise by 100? No, I didn't. I just wanted to match.
No, it's like you don't know what color your shirt is sometimes. That's funny, And yeah, I'll actually, I'm going to address this one here because, when I was a teenager, there was Helen Keller jokes. I see them very differently. Yeah, you know what? That's an example of the kind of joke that'll get you in trouble. And, this is an interesting topic. And, anyone in the comments can jump in here. I trained to do satire at Chicago's Second City, which really prides itself on being subversive and being satirical, and you're making fun of celebrities, you're making fun of politics, you're making fun of sports and society, you're making fun of the city of Chicago. But yeah, you're always trying to come at it from your own truth. And I think the example with the Helen Keller jokes, it's very callous because it was always just making light of the fact that she was, blind and deaf. Whereas when you write comedy with people that are different from you, you learn so much more. And I have live streams now, and Cam has a live stream too, where we bring on people who have various disabilities that we don't have, and it's like Cam and I did a bit about being colorblind Lydia Allen, when I had her on the show, did a bit about dyslexia. Meryl Evans, who's one of my favorite deaf speakers, I got to have her back on the show. We weren't doing a sketch at the same time, but like I would love to do a sketch with her about deafness. And when you're creating with a group of people, they will surprise you with what they're able to joke about. I've had times where I am working with non-white writers or gay writers or trans writers or, you know, anybody, insert any sort of personality type that's different from my experience. And I always have these moments where I'm like, whoa, you can joke about that? This is a thing you joke about? And they're like, we all joke about this because it's so ridiculous.
But isn't that about learning about other people as it is, right? And as organizations mature, we realize that, hey, diversity is cool and it actually works, right? Well, have you ever heard of an organization say, yeah, I can't wait to de-diversify my organization, right? And if we can see the benefits of having diversity of ways people think and act and do and lived experiences and past experiences, then that should and must include people with disabilities as well. I just want to say, hey, William, hey, how's it going? Good to see you here as well. Amelia, how's it going? Two people who follow me and come to my show as well. Just really
but this is, again, it's like, and this is the thing too with, it drives me nuts about DEI training in a lot of organizations, including around disabilities. It's like, I feel like there is so much work being done at the top levels to never say the wrong thing that they separate themselves from actually talking to the people who are affected by their decisions to protect themselves, you know? And Meryl Evans, we talked about her earlier. She's a deaf speaker and creator on LinkedIn. And I reached out to her when I started doing stuff being like, hey, you know, I'm captioning my comedy. I wanted to show it to you. And she was like, can I give you some feedback on these captions? And that made me better. That made me a better creator. It helped me understand her point of view. You know, it got a new friend into my life. I just became friends with her. You know, we did some events together. And now when I do a piece of comedy about captions, I'm still trying to make it funny. I still throw a lot of comedy in my stuff, but it's not about, haha, like, you know, those people need captions. I don't. It's like, I understand a little bit more about the real frustration, the real, like, you know, and that's what I always feel like comedy is about. Pain, and comedy is about, you know, struggle, and you recognize the humanity in someone, and oftentimes you're like, oh gosh, I'm glad that's not me. Glad I didn't get hit in the face with a pie at my fancy soiree. Boy, would that be embarrassing. You know, and it's like the more you talk to people, you learn that, like, oh yeah, this stuff really is funny. And like, that's a really stupid problem that should be fixed, because that's silly that people have to deal with blah blah all the time, you know?
Right. And when you think about the fact that we will all be disabled at some point in our lives, right? At some point, we will cross that threshold of 65, 70, 75 years old, where our mobility won't work so well. We may have chronic pain. We may have a reduction in our ability to see and hear, and or cognitive disabilities. It will happen to everybody at some point. So what I like to think about as well is, hey, if this is going to happen to me, I better make the best experience I can to teach everyone around me how to create the best experience as well, because I don't want to be affected like that. Have you ever been frustrated with the website? Of course you have, right? No one who hasn't been frustrated with a piece of technology. And imagine that tenfold. Imagine that 100-fold. Imagine that every single time you turn on an app, you got to wonder, I wonder if this is going to work today with the technology that I'm using. You know, I wonder if I can actually order an Uber today, because the last guy I ordered who tried to pick me up didn't want my service animal to get in the car with me. Can you imagine if that was your real life experience? And you know what? I've got friends who joke about that now. And that is a funny experience. They said he had to go through 3 Uber drivers. And he says, well, good thing I got to fire 3 Uber drivers on my ride here today. That's funny. That's a funny experience.
Yeah.
Literally, did you know that on with Uber, if they reject your drive because you have a service animal, they can just lose their Uber license like that.
Yeah, I mean, William, to your point here, you know, see humor in a person's disability as dehumanizing. You know, I make it a point. I don't dehumanize people in my comedy. I don't like that. I don't like to make people feel small with my comedy. If anything, I'm putting myself in a compromising situation. But I would argue there's a difference between like making fun of somebody's disability versus talking to someone about their disability and they're like, oh, here's something I think is funny, and then exploring that with them, you know? It's one of those things too where I feel like oftentimes we can fall into this trap with DEI where we feel like we need to speak for people. You know, we're speaking on behalf of somebody else. When really, if you just make your platform more accessible to them, they're perfectly fine to speak on their own, you know? Yeah, I'm just going to throw it back to you if you got any more comments here on William's thoughts.
Yeah, you know what? I can appreciate where he's come from, though. You know, like the dehumanizing part, and it's so easy to make fun of that person because I'm going to use a term here, quite derogatory, like they're a cripple. Oh, look at that person! That's making fun of somebody. That is negatively pointing at somebody from something that they cannot control. They have no choice to be like. But to include someone as part of the group, to include someone and joke around about something as part of the group, as long as it's initiated by somebody, you know what? I've been in that situation before, and I know because we as humans, we josh, right? We joke around with each other, and if I make fun with you, and then you make fun with me, that actually builds relationships. Now it's totally different if it's someone who you don't know, right? I think there's a whole idea of at what point does comedy go too far, and it's a very fine line too. Yeah. And I want to just add one thing here. One thing that you can do in any situation, if you don't know, the best thing you can do is just ask. Quite simply, you mentioned about your event with Meryl. You had Meryl Evans on. Actually, tomorrow on my show, I have someone she's a deaf entrepreneur, and she helps with creating customer experiences for people who are deaf and helping organizations relate better to the deaf community. I've never worked with her before, so I just simply asked, hey, what's the best way for you and I to communicate on a live show? And she says, well, just hire this interpreter that I have. And we went through a few interpreters. I have my own interpreter, but just simply asking the question leads from a point of curiosity, right? Leads from a point of understanding and accepting and wanting to know more about that person. If you just assume and you jump right in right away, well, that's offensive. I mean, and I'm not saying it's you. Anyone.
Yeah, no. I want to, and great point there. I want to talk to Diana's point here about people have to be willing to listen. And I have a couple thoughts on this. One, yes, and especially if you're a content creator, you have to separate yourself from your work. And when your audience tells you, I didn't like that, I don't appreciate that, that was disrespectful, you have to be able to put your ego aside and say, you know what, maybe that was not the best joke, you know? And right. If you get defensive about it, it's no different than a comedian who goes and delivers a bunch of lame jokes and nobody laughs. And they go, well, the stupid audience didn't get it. It's like, well, you're the comedian and you were supposed to make them laugh, you know? So, and this is why I also recommend, you know, working with people and collaborating artistically with people who are differently than you, because there were times where I had to have uncomfortable conversations where someone in my group who is not a white man would be like, can I explain to you why that made me uncomfortable, what you just did? You know what? I'm going to request that you never write a character like this again. And here's the issue I have with that, you know? And those conversations, even when they succeed, right? Even when both people are in agreement that wasn't okay and that I need to change, that's never a fun conversation on either end. It's not easy for that person to say, I'm uncomfortable with this. And it's not easy to hear when you thought they were going to like it, you know?
Absolutely.
But this is part of comedy. And I believe that comedy is always going to be about pushing boundaries. Comedy is always about saying the thing that's on everybody's mind, but they're too afraid to say it. But also comedy has a shelf life, you know? And someone in the comments here was talking about George Carlin. And I always say, if you look at George Carlin, he has a lot of material that did not age well. And right. In his defense, he wasn't going out there in the 90s doing the jokes that he wrote in the 1970s, because comedy is very of the moment. Like, it shouldn't be, like, there has to be an expiration date. Like, the best jokes are the ones that happen on the spot in the moment, you know? So, it is like, you have to talk to people, you have to get to reality if you want to have comedy that actually lands with your audience, But you also have to be open to the idea of like, you know what? Maybe that was an ignorant joke, and maybe there's something funnier I could do that's still real, but that everybody in the audience is going to laugh at because it's true.
And I think the more you get out there, and I want to just move that away from only comedy, because I think anytime you put yourself out there, I know me as a speaker, I approach organizations and I speak about disabilities. And sometimes I know that I can be direct with the word disability, and people aren't always ready to hear that. People don't know what my story is or my experience is in the world of disability inclusion. And I know I've had people look up to me and say, oh, can he really say that? Is he allowed to say something like that? And yeah, unless you're approaching the situation, warming people up to your experiences and your knowledge and your empathy towards the community, be it other DEI communities or communities of disability, like it doesn't matter what it is, then you're gonna get stuck in some situation where someone's gonna say, I didn't like what you just said. So these are presentation skills. These are skills that you can work on and get better at. And to anyone out there who is a content creator, posts a lot on any of the social platforms, and you don't, cancel culture is really big right now, and we could probably talk about that for a while. But if that's what you're feeling, if you're feeling like people are reaching out to you and saying, I don't like what you did, just softening the blow, learning a little bit more about how to approach a situation would probably help not just this one specific scenario, but your content as a whole as well.
You know what? Let's talk about cancel culture, because there is a trajectory that accessibility advocates go on. And this is every single person I've ever talked to who dedicates themselves to like advocacy for about accessibility. The arc that I've noticed is you start out, and people with disabilities are different, but oftentimes it's somebody who's not with a disability who becomes interested in this issue. So this is especially their arc. They go from being completely ignorant about accessibility to learning about it in a very short amount of time to becoming very loud and shaming towards the companies that don't do it right. And then they dial it back. And I've seen there's a lot of accessibility speakers that I know, and they all, for the most part, they all kind of had the same thing where they went through a time where they were angry. They were really shaming these companies publicly and saying you're doing X and Y and Z wrong. And that's not always the most effective way to enact change. So can you tell me a little bit about this journey? And did you go on that journey?
Well, I always start to think of like, what is effective advocacy? And so the first thing I did is I looked at other groups that had made effective changes. Not saying the change is all the way there. Don't get me wrong. But I looked at movements like Black Lives Matter. I looked at movements like Stop Asian Hate. I looked at women's rights movements and gay rights movements and movements like that, which have moved the needle and furthered society's acceptance and belonging for these marginalized groups. And I said, what were some of the best things that they did? And how can I learn from that and apply it to this community as well? Because I'm with you. I think the last thing the world needs is somebody to stand up and say, this company's wrong and this is all the bad things they did. Because you know what? I don't believe that fosters very much change if it's just one voice, right? And there's a lot out there to say that you threatening to, for example, if you threaten to cancel your wireless service providers, your wireless carrier's account, are they really going to care? Probably not, right? But if you start making a change, if you start trying to help that company and help that organization and say, hey, you know what? Just like what Meryl did for you, right? Hey, I've got some tips for you. I've got some tips that would improve the way that you're reaching out to my group, to my culture. Can I give you some tips? And I've done that before. A calendar booking app that is quite familiar out there. Their calendar widget did not work properly for screen readers. I had two choices, right? I could have either gone on socials, blasted them for it, where probably they had no idea. And many people come from the point of either ignorance or not knowing, or they just made a simple mistake. All I needed to do is email their support one time and say, hey, I've got some tips on how to make this better. I just wanted to let you know the experience for people who are using screen readers, who are using assistive technology. Can I get in contact with someone to give you some tips? Right away, I got an email back and they said, yeah, of course. It took 2 more emails and the fix went in, and now this app is usable by screen readers out there.
Well, and they want to do better.
They want to do better. Don't they want more business, right? Like, isn't that what they want to do?
Well, and here, I'll actually go one step further on this. So, again, when I started out, I was like, oh, I just learned what accessibility is. I'm going to call out these companies who aren't doing it perfectly. And I had to have a very realization, like a very real moment with myself where I realized, you know what? That act of publicly shaming them is more about calling my attention to myself than it is to calling attention to the issue. You know,
exactly.
What I was doing in those call outs was I was trying to say, hey, everybody, just so you know, I'm not the problem. Couldn't be me. Look at how I just made these people look terrible because they didn't do the right thing, you know? Whereas I'm like, oh, you know what? If I just give my platform to some accessibility advocates for an hour and I say, hey, let's teach my network how to caption their stuff, that might actually help some deaf people have a better experience on LinkedIn. You know, but I kind of had to set my need to be validated for believing the good things and ask myself, like, what could I actually do with my platform that's going to help people? And, you know, again, there's a content here that I thought actually, this is going back, Perry said this, we were talking about working with people who are different from you. And Perry asked a great question, like, doesn't that put
a great one.
exclusively on the minority group to break the ice and set the tone first? And, you know, that's a nuanced question, but I would say there are a lot of people who would like to have a platform, you know, and there's a difference between like making them your token and actually giving them ownership over the creativity of the show, you know, and that means they're going to get in jokes and they're going to get in things that they want to get in there that maybe necessarily wasn't your idea. And you've also got to be able to pull back when they say, hey, I don't think your sketch should be in the show, you know, and you got to be able to separate yourself from your ego. But I find too often people want to say, you know, especially with disabilities, they have a point of view that they've developed through lived experience. They're just often not given a platform. You know, I don't know. What do you think about this question from Perry, Cam?
First off, Perry, this is an excellent question, and you're absolutely right. It is really, really nuanced. I've had parallels with my friends who are not cis white men, you know, who say like, why is it always up to us to have to say hire Black people in the organization? Like, why does it have to be that? And I get it, and I understand that, and I think that's where the idea that people like us who can talk about people with disabilities are humans like everyone else, and we need to start thinking about them before the last person in line, right? Like, this is something that we need to start talking about and thinking about. And I think the platform, like these conversations, learning about people with disabilities, and you know what? It's not that expensive to have an interpreter on your show. It really isn't. And so if you are needing that, or if you want to, you know, start that process, bringing someone on who has that real lived experience. Last week, I had someone on who is a double amputee, and listening to her lived experiences as someone who is Black, who's a Black woman and disabled, and hearing her talk about the intersectionality of all these of disabilities and race and gender, you know, everything coming at one. She had some fantastic lived experiences and some really, really interesting stories about how do we start these conversations and where her life brought her. So you're absolutely right. Is it always up to the marginalized communities to bring up the fact that they need to be heard? Absolutely not. But here we are talking about it right now. And this is, I think, what's the important. And we are changing culture right now, Chris. Like, this is part of that culture change that's trying to be shifted.
Yeah. Well, so here's a great one. I think this is a great segue too into a lot of what you spend your work doing, Cam, you know, but William here is saying that, you know, in accessibility, the one constant is oftentimes companies do this. It's the absolute last thing they think about. You know, this is basically, it's an afterthought reflecting the culture. So yeah, I feel like this is teed up for you because you talk a lot about this.
Yeah, this is such a big topic. Like, why do we always think about it at the end?
Tell them about your sketch. Tell them about the egg.
So I guess the first time Chris noticed me, no, the first time I really did something on LinkedIn, that my first viral post. What I did is I cracked an egg on top of a piece of cake and tried to mix it in, and then I had my other persona come down and say, like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm adding an accessibility. And if you add something in at the end, like, the end product isn't better. And that, of course, I showed it to my son and I said, do you want to eat this? And he said, no, thanks. And, it's always the kids. If you want to get some good ratings, just put some kids in your videos. It doesn't matter whose kids, just put some kids in there and it's great.
You also tagged Chris Bogue. You're like, this is my Chris Bogiest video yet. And I'm like,
yeah,
I'm going to sell this guy a coaching
yeah, exactly. I did something. But like, adding things on, there's lots of things that we add on to the end in organizations. It's not just accessibility. What, cybersecurity? When does you work a lot in SaaS? There's lots of organizations out there.
Oh, they do that badly too.
Oh my God! And this is our information. This doesn't only affect one marginalized group or the end of marginalized. This affects everyone. Like, my passwords are being saved in a plain text database. Like, that's offensive. I'm thinking of it more like, why is it that it's 2023 coming up and I have friends who can't order a pizza using the Domino's app to try and order? Like, that's wrong. It's part of a company culture. And that's where people and advocates like William, like you, like me, like Chris, going into organizations and saying, hey, by the way, this is something really small that you can do, and it'll increase your it'll increase your market share. It'll increase the usability of your app. That's a big word I like to use. I'm just going to take a segue here and say the word usability works really, really well to talk about accessibility, like, really well, because there's not a product owner out there, there's not a scrum master out there who doesn't want their product to not be usable. And if you go and say, this is barely usable by 1 in 7 people, like, are you sure you want to put that out there? They start to really cringe and say, okay, how can we make this better? And
I would also say, just like, if you're a person who's running a business, especially if you're running your own business, it makes your life easier. I'm not just out here preaching captions because I'm such a wonderful person. I'm not. But actually, as a business owner, I experienced all these extra benefits that I was not expecting because I made my captions readable. So one example of this is, I pull the transcript of every coaching session I do. Every time I do a consultation, I pull the transcript afterwards. All my live shows, I pull the transcript. And what that allows me to do is have a record of everything I've said. And I turn that into content. I use that to build a course. I went through all my transcripts and I said, okay, what's every single question I've ever been asked in a coaching session? What do people not know about? What the people who had the best experience from what I was teaching, what were we talking about, And again, you think about, oh, I'll make captions so the deaf person in the audience can get the message. Well, that also means the corporate executive who's in the back seat of an Uber who doesn't have their AirPods in is going to get your message too. And that person might get you 50% to your quota, So it's like, there are all these other benefits that happen when you make your stuff usable to everybody that, like, you won't even know. It's just a pleasant surprise, but it's like, that comes with doing that first. You do it right. You figure out what's the way I can maximize my message, my product, my facility,
Absolutely.
whatever it is, to everybody. And then the benefits just kind of go from there, including meeting more people who are different from you, having real conversations with them, discovering what that segment of your audience cares about, and now you can actually talk to them with more credibility.
Yeah, I want to add something else in here. If you're making any picture posts, Instagram or LinkedIn, things like that, there are some really, really easy tips to make them just more usable. Left aligning all of your fonts, not using all caps in your posts, making sure the color of the background and the foreground is easy enough to read. I like to just use at arm's length. If you can read something at arm's length, you're probably pretty good. These are tips that help people with things like dyslexia, or help with people with cognitive impairments, or people who are colorblind like myself. It's going to be a lot easier to read. But not only that, people who are scrolling at 1,000,000 miles a minute are going to stop on a post that they can read quickly because your brain is going to detect the patterns. Like, let's go back to having left line font that's also not all caps. Your brain actually registers the pattern at the top of the fonts. That's actually how you read. You ever done that test before where you cut off the bottom of some lines of text and you can still read it because your eye actually follows the top? You ever seen that? Well, if you have everything in all caps, you can't do that. You can't read quickly. So there's all these like little tips. If you have a picture as your background, make sure that the text on top is legible over that image, because otherwise text over image is a really hard thing to read. It's too mixed up. So there's all these features and all these things which make your content more legible, make it more usable. And I just want to take a second here and talk about graphs for a second. If you're doing a sales presentation, you've got a deck, right? You pop up a slide deck and it's got this massive graph full of colors. The text and the it is so content heavy. Take all those numbers out, man. Like, take it all out. What's the message that this graph is actually trying to communicate? Just focus on that. Just focus on the trend line. Like, whatever you need to do, make it, like, boil it down to the bare bones. That will help your message get across faster, and it'll also help people with disabilities understand what the message is about too.
Yeah, I want to do so. I want to actually backtrack to something Cam said, so we go into it a little bit deeper. So yeah, this person, unfortunately StreamYard won't show me who they are, but so Unicode, meaning like you throw those fancy fonts that make your LinkedIn text look different. Those are terrible for screen readers. And what you were talking about with captions, I want to go in on this because this is something I learned from Meryl. So when you're making captions, everybody at home, you should be focusing on readability over creativity.
Correct.
If you have the chance to make them boring and readable, or creative and artistic, make them boring and readable. Because you know who else does that? Netflix and HBO and Disney Plus and Xbox and all the gold standards in all the things that people watch. All those captions is white text on a dark gray background.
Correct. Yep.
So that is what I always use for captions. You'll see it's always white text on a dark gray background. And we're at our time here, so let's just get off one. Can you just tell them in like a minute about alt text and what they should do the next time they post an image and ask them about alt text?
Really easy. Alt text is hidden text that improves your SEO on your website. Okay, it's also used by people who can't see or use assistive technologies to read your website or your posts. It'll allow them to understand what the image is actually all about. But man, it improves SEO, and a lot of websites now, a lot of social media is prioritizing images in their algorithms that have alt text. Like, there's so many benefits, and it's one button, right? You go and post, and whatever text is inside the image, just repeat that, just type that out, so that somebody with a vision impairment who uses a screen reader will be able to read and understand what that image actually is. Don't have to be very descriptive. You can even have a bit of fun with it too. I like to have a bit of fun with my alt text and actually, give an idea. Memes are great. If you want to have a good time, go try and put some alt text on memes. It's a good time.
Yeah, caption your stuff, put alt text in your images. Not only is it going to be more accessible, you're going to be more searchable. More people are going to find you in search, because guess what? People are searching for the words you're talking about, searching for the things that your images are about. You have your message out there. People want to get it. Accessibility for everyone. We really can't stress the benefits of this enough. So, Cam, I know I could talk to you about this all day. Unfortunately, we are at our time, so why don't we just take one more time for our audience to go find you. If they want to follow you, if they want to follow your stuff, they want to follow your content, or if they want to bring you in as a speaker about accessibility, where can my audience go find you?
Best place to interact with me is still on LinkedIn. You can just connect with me here. Or if you want to send me an email, cam@cambeaudoin.com. Spelling is on LinkedIn. But really, the best place to reach out, just send me a message on LinkedIn or click the link on my profile and come see my live show every Friday, noon Eastern time. And come find me there.
Awesome. Cam, thank you so much for being on the show, everybody. I am Chris Bogue. You can find me at chrisbogue.io. Get the course. join the cohort, or don't. I'm not your dad, you know? You could just join me. I've got comedy all the time. We have fun content. It's all accessible. Cam, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Really appreciate it. Have a great time.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm just going to throw in another advertisement here at the end because what's my audience going to do about it? So let's play.
What am I going to do about it? I'm going to watch it.
Iggy.
Hello?
Is this Mr. Sherbert?
It sure is. What can I help you with, brother?
Hello. You were not expecting this call. Do you have 17 seconds to
Hang
learn
on a
about
second.
mercifully short?
Is this a cold call?
I don't know.
You. Never call this number again.
Oh no! Another unsuccessful cold call. You probably don't have time to fuck off.
I got a quota to hit.
Are you spending hours every week cold calling and cold emailing but not seeing results?
There's gotta be a better way.
Introducing the complete guide to selling on video. Whether you're new to sales or a President's Club member, this fast and fun course will teach you to efficiently create short, customized videos that get results. The complete guide to selling on video is not sold in stores. Visit chrisbogue.io and use promo code GIMMEGIMME to take $50 off while supplies last. Don't delay. Get noticed today.
Good night, everybody.